She stood at my door with a small suitcase and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days, and before she even spoke, I knew this wasn't just a casual visit, it was a breaking point. The rain had soaked the edges of her coat, strands of hair stuck to her cheeks, and when she whispered my name, it sounded like she was holding herself together by a thread. We hadn't seen each other in months, not since life pulled us in opposite directions and left things unsaid between us, but there she was, trembling, asking the one question that can change everything: can I stay here, just for a while? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I felt the weight of what "while" really meant. Letting her in wasn't just opening a door, it was reopening memories, emotions, and wounds that had never fully healed. Still, I stepped aside, and the moment she crossed the threshold, something shifted. The silence between us was loud, filled with history. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't want to take up space, clutching her hands together as if afraid they might fall apart. Eventually, the words came out in pieces. Things hadn't worked out where she was living, trust had been broken, and the place that was supposed to feel like home had turned into somewhere she no longer felt safe. As she spoke, her voice cracked, and I realized this wasn't just about needing a roof, it was about needing to be seen, heard, and held together when everything else had failed. That night, I gave her the spare room, but sleep didn't come easily for either of us. Every sound felt louder, every thought heavier. I lay awake wondering how long she would stay and whether this closeness would heal us or tear us open all over again. And as I stared at the ceiling, I knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning of something much deeper than either of us was ready to face. If stories like this pull at your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next changes everything. Living together turned out to be nothing like I expected. At first, it was small, quiet moments, shared coffee in the morning, polite conversations, careful distance. But emotions don't stay quiet for long. One evening, I found her sitting on the floor of the kitchen, back against the cabinet, crying silently like she didn't want anyone to hear. When I asked what was wrong, she finally broke, telling me how tired she was of being strong, of pretending she was okay when she wasn't. I sat beside her, unsure of what to say, until she leaned into me, and suddenly all the walls we'd built collapsed at once. That was the moment things became emotional, not dramatic, not romanticized, just raw and real. Days passed, and the house slowly filled with warmth again, but it also filled with questions. Late-night talks stretched into early mornings, where we confessed fears we'd never said out loud before. She admitted she was scared to leave because this was the first place she felt safe in a long time. I admitted I was scared she'd stay and change everything I thought I wanted. One night, during a power outage, we sat in candlelight, and she asked me, almost afraid of the answer, "Do you think some people come into our lives not to stay forever, but to remind us who we are?" That question stayed with me long after the lights came back on. Eventually, the time came when she had to decide what was next. On her last morning, she packed the same small suitcase, but she looked different, stronger, calmer. At the door, she thanked me, not just for a place to stay, but for giving her space to heal. When she left, the house felt quieter than ever, but my heart felt fuller. I realized that sometimes people don't enter our lives to stay, they come to change us. And if this story touched you, moved you, or reminded you of someone in your own life, subscribe to the channel, because these are the stories that remind us we're not alone. After she left, I thought the hardest part would be missing her presence, but I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing how deeply she had rearranged my life without even trying. Every corner of the house carried echoes of her: the mug she always used, the quiet humming while she cooked, the way she folded blankets with care like she was afraid of leaving a mess behind. Days passed, then weeks, and I found myself replaying conversations we had late at night, the kind where honesty slips out because the world is asleep and there's nothing left to pretend. I wondered if she missed those moments too, or if she had already moved on, stronger and lighter, while I stayed behind carrying questions. One evening, she texted me out of nowhere, just a simple, "I hope you're doing okay." It shouldn't have meant much, but it did. We started talking again, slowly at first, cautious not to step on old emotions, but honesty returned quickly, as if it had been waiting for permission. She told me she'd found a small place of her own, that she was rebuilding her life piece by piece. I told her the house still felt empty. When we finally met for coffee, there was no awkwardness, only a quiet understanding between two people who had seen each other at their weakest. She looked at me and said, "You saved me without realizing it." I wanted to tell her she had done the same for me. That night, as I walked home alone, I understood something important. Sometimes, the people who pass through our lives leave behind a version of ourselves we never knew existed. If this story feels real to you, make sure you subscribe, because the most meaningful moments often come after the goodbye. Months later, life didn't magically become perfect, but it became clearer. I stopped fearing emotional closeness and started valuing it. She and I didn't end up together in the way people might expect, but we remained connected by something deeper than romance: gratitude. The gratitude of having been there for each other when it mattered most. One final conversation sealed it for me. She said, "I don't think I would have survived that time if you hadn't opened your door." And I replied, "I don't think I would have learned how to feel again if you hadn't walked through it." We both smiled, knowing some connections aren't meant to be permanent, but they are meant to be transformative. As time went on, I carried her story with me, not as a wound, but as a reminder that offering kindness can change lives, including your own. And to anyone listening to this story who has ever needed a place to stay, emotionally or physically, or has opened their door to someone else, remember this: you matter more than you know. Subscribe to the channel for more real, emotional stories like this, because sometimes, the quietest moments leave the loudest impact. Time has a quiet way of revealing truths we don't notice in the moment. Long after she stopped needing a place to stay, I realized that what she had really needed, and what I had unknowingly offered, was permission to fall apart without being judged. And in doing so, she gave me the same permission. Life moved forward, as it always does, but I moved differently now. I listened more. I felt more. I stopped rushing people out of my life just because their presence felt complicated. Every once in a while, she would cross my mind, not with sadness, but with a calm appreciation, like remembering a chapter in a book that changed how you see the rest of the story. One evening, while cleaning the spare room, I found a note she had left behind, folded neatly in a drawer I hadn't opened in months. It simply said, "Thank you for giving me space when I had none left inside myself." I sat there for a long time holding that note, realizing that sometimes the most important things we give others can't be measured or returned. They simply echo forward. And that's when it hit me: this story was never about her staying or leaving. It was about two people meeting at the exact moment they needed each other most, then having the courage to let go without resentment. If you're watching this and wondering whether opening your heart is worth the risk, let this be your sign that it is. Because even temporary connections can leave permanent strength behind. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories like this, stories that remind us we're human, we're healing, and we're never truly alone.